I look at it the other way, that the time has come for the international community to address the issue of Iran. I mean, how long are we going to continue from 1979 till now? The Americans have led the way, ignored by the Israelis, to continue this confrontation against Iran. I think the time has come for all of us to settle down and see what we can do with regard to addressing some issues that are legitimate and some issues that have no basis, and clear the air so that we can get on with it. So this is, we leave this point at this stage. Prices, as you know, all of the things that I have talked to you about, technology, demand and supply, Asian demand, American demand scenario, the supplies available, the various geopolitical developments that have taken place, denial of oil from Iran, each and every one of them taken together is having an impact on prices. But the pricing of oil is one of the most mysterious aspects of the global economy and global politics. None of us have fully understood it. It is not just linked with demand, supply and cost of production like any other item. It has numerous other factors that contribute to it. One of the most important factors that has emerged recently is forward trading in oil. This emerged, it was there earlier in the 80s, but it really caught up in the 1990s. So that you have forward trading in oil. These are called paper barrels because they don't exist actually. To the extent of trillions of tons of oil are traded in a month, which is more than the production of several years. But they are there and they have their own impact. The trading is done by people with very little knowledge of West Asia. Therefore they panic. Anytime something happens, they panic. Daniel Yergin in his new book, The Quest on Energy Security, Global Energy Security, says that the NYMEX, that is the New York Mercantile Exchange, oil barrels are traded by people who have no knowledge either of oil or of the Middle East. But they look at the impact they have. And then you have geopolitical implications, the panic factor. That anytime something happens in West Asia, the oil prices go up. Today it is stated that geopolitical factors alone pertaining to West Asia have contributed at least $40 per barrel to the price of oil. And Israel's constant threats against Iran have contributed at least $25 of that. So these are prices. At the same time, there are other factors. Our Gulf countries in the context of Arab Spring announced huge expenditures for their own people in order to buy up support, I think. Basically to stem the tide of demand for freedom by giving you large dollars of cash in various, by stimulating the economy, by expanding welfare, by giving you dole, etc. So in any case, the long and short of it is that the commitments that have been made by the GCC countries are so significant that they need a high oil price. That the spending earlier, just look at the figures I have got here. That 2004 they were comfortable with prices of 22 to 28 barrels per barrel. A year later, a little more. A year later, but now with the Arab Spring, from 2011 they are minimally require a price of 80 per barrel, and for this year where we are now, it's really $100 a barrel. That means if oil prices go below $100, these major producers will simply not generate the revenues that they have promised to their own people. Of course, asset prices are affected by Iranian sanctions and the economic scenario. I'll give you an example of this. I've just taken three. What happened in May, what happened in June, and what happened in August. Just now, where we are. You will see the prices have gone up and down. Every day you open the newspaper, you will say, oh, the prices have gone up. A few days later, the prices have come down. But if you look at this, you will see that at one time they went down because there was a sense, oh, the talks with Iran are going well. Or, Moscow and then Baghdad, oh, they are going well. Then they said, anyway, there's poor economic performance, demand for oil is going to be low. Jobs report came from United States, demand for oil is going to be low. The Chinese announced that their industrial production has come down, demand for oil will be low. So at that, and then OPEC itself, Ali Al-Naimi intervened in the global debate and said, at the time when oil prices were 124, that Saudi Arabia will be happy with oil prices of 100. So oil prices came down. They went down further. Continuing these trends, they went down further in June. So the June was the first occasion in recent history that you had more production than consumption. Then it all changed in August. In August again, firstly, Iran-related issues are not being sorted out. Global demand has gone up. Somebody says because the Americans are driving a lot during the summer vacation. In the case of the Asian countries, they're using more air conditioning, therefore they're using more power. The Iranian threat. So therefore this is known as the geopolitical risk premium. And the global demand is therefore, Asian demand continues to go high. India and all. So all of these have given a kind of yo-yo impact. There is going to be massive investment in the energy sector. Very significant investment in the energy, going into several $1 billion, and this will continue because this is what you need. This is what you need in order to, more and more the GCC, instead of exporting just crude oil, they want to have value added. So they want to have oil products and oil and petrochemicals. So there are many massive investments now taking place in these sectors, so that there is a shift away from the availability of crude oil and more investment in refining and petrochemicals. Also, when you have gas, for example, gas has very high calorific value. You use gas as fuel, which is a very cheap fuel in sectors that need high calorific value, like the fertilizer industry or like the glass industry and various other industries. So these are the industries that are now developing as part of economic diversification in the production, in the producing countries. So these are some of the things that are happening, and I will leave this point. Now, India, our condition is extremely poor in terms of what we have put down on paper as our requirements, in terms of our demand. We have very rarely met our requirements. This report, the Integrated Energy Policy document, came out in August 2006, and at that time these were some of the milestones that were set out in terms of our energy consumption and in terms of power production. None of this has any connection with reality. Now 6 years later, there is no mention in the last 6 years of this report which was prepared by the Planning Commission, and no effort has been made on the ground to actually achieve what all had been put down. If the country was serious about energy security, they would have set up task forces to actually implement all the things that were required for the nation. And yet, separately, the political leadership says to us that if I don't have growth rates of between 8 to 10%, I cannot pull people out of poverty. But if you don't have the power generation that you have yourself put down, you are condemning your nation to growth rates of 4 or 4.5% per annum. So there is a disconnect between what one part of the government says is required for national salvation and the other part of government does nothing about it whatsoever. That is why you have the scenario which you are involved in. This report had talked about various scenarios for the future that we should focus on. They gave 10 different scenarios. I have chosen only 4 of those here. But the point is that it makes no difference. From now till 2032, which is my foreseeable future as far as energy is concerned, at that time it is going to be a hydrocarbon plus coal, that is fossil fuel future. Let me tell you, whatever I've just put down, whatever you may do to augment domestic capabilities and resources, whatever you may do, you still have this. If you were to realize the full potential of nuclear power, of hydropower, of renewables, etc., even then, even if you achieve every idealistic target which has been set out in the report, you are still looking at a dependence on fossil fuels of between 70% and 85% in the different scenarios that have been mentioned, which you don't have. And therefore we looked at energy diplomacy. And some of you are familiar that we had a program, a robust, very active, very substantial program of energy diplomacy with which I was marginally associated, and this was the various aspects of this energy diplomacy that engage with the international community in different aspects so that you enhance the capabilities of your own nation and ensure that you get the growth rates which are required for your national salvation. These were the various aspects of energy security. I will just sort of speed up a bit, but this presentation is available and you can access it later. We thought of energy security as a win-win. We did not see it in terms of geopolitical competition. We thought that the international community has to necessarily work together. There is not a single country or community or company or country that can say we are self-sufficient. You need technology, you need human resources, and you need financial resources that require you to work together. Again, the physical aspect of energy security is also not just the security of oil wells. It is the entire value chain from the oil well to the port, to the refinery, from the refinery to the port, from the port to the country where it will be used, where it then